Yeah, so I am in my apartment in Prospect Heights in Brooklyn, all 700 square feet of it. So I'm between what is my dining room over here and my living room over here, at a desk that are in between the two spaces.
My gosh. So what's like the most drastic thing that's changed about the way that you have to work right now? And how,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, so for us, like I work on a team at NBC News, which is called News Features, and we specialize in doing documentary style news video that is usually like in the 5 to 10 minute range as opposed to like feature length documentaries. And so most of the work that we do is highly reported. We spend a lot of time with our subjects. We're in the field, in their homes, with them at their jobs, whatever. And then, cutting together, over a 2 to 6 week editing process, pretty big feature package, right? That ends up both living on its own, but also usually will accompany like a written piece or like a multimedia package or something like that, right? And so for us, we, unlike a text reporter that can still call a lot of the sources that they would in order to get the quotes that they need, we can't go into the field. Like NBC has limited almost all of the visual producers and shooters to teams of two or less. You have to get special dispensation in order to go out and film. Most of the stuff that we do is not based around New York City. It's primarily like elsewhere in the country, and like we're not allowed to travel right now. Like there are some things that we could potentially do if we got special dispensation from like security services at NBC, but it's like a pretty high bar to clear. Um, and so for us, our entire filming weapon in our arsenal is now removed, right? And so we, one, had to get very crafty with all the different like screen capture technologies, conducting most of our interviews exactly like this over Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or whatever. We're having to like teach people that we're talking to how to like film B-roll for us, like if they're doing like a POV or like a first person narrative of something. And then, from an editing standpoint, like we're having to learn how to not learn, but like apply a lot of different treatments to the video, and then kind of helping our audience like understand how, this is kind of what we're forced to do, right? And so we're relying a lot more on first person narrative stuff, and then a lot more kind of like expert, testimony, and interviews. And then that was like true for definitely the first 2 or 3 weeks. But we have started to pull back a little bit from the daily news cycle because it was very much just kind of all hands on deck. Everyone that could produce video. Nightly News was taking our stuff. Today Show was taking our stuff. Like the new streaming network, NBC News Now, was taking our stuff. So like we were just putting out like a bunch of video. We've kind of gotten over that, the crest of that wave a little bit. So now we're trying to figure out more of the kind of the long tail, like what are the pieces that we're going to be publishing a month to a month and a half from now? What are those going to look like? Who do we need to start interviewing now in order to like set the seeds for that? So on and so forth. So it's a
Are those
complete,
still going to be COVID stories? Like, are you thinking 2 months out? Are those still stories related to this pandemic?
yeah. So we're doing two different versions of stories. I think one is what we're calling long tail COVID stories, which are like documenting things that are happening now and then following up, like what does it look like, 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months from now. That could be things from like the mental impact, like whether or not like people are going to end up getting PTSD from this, both from like frontline workers as well as people that are working, remotely, and just like general anxiety and scared. We pitched a few stories today about like folks who are going through like in vitro fertilization, right? And like they might end up getting cut off. And so like, what does that mean for them trying to conceive over the next like 3 or 4 months? And so there's a lot of different stories that we're looking at that are kind of like life is changing right now. So what is the impact going to be, 4 or 5 months from now, as well as we're now like pretty explicitly looking at what we're calling counter programming, which are the normal types of stories that we would be doing that are not tied to the news cycle at all, but trying to figure out from a production language and a visual language standpoint, what does it look like when we still have to report them from quarantine, but the stories aren't related to quarantine? So how do we like find that balance, right? So we're like, but that's literally like we had a pitch meeting like an hour ago where we're trying to figure out like what does that look like and how do we do that?
That's exciting to know that I feel like everyone right now is reporting it's like all COVID-19 all the time. So it's
Correct.
good to know that people are starting to think about how do we like weave in other stories because there's still so many things that are happening.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so, and like a lot of the things are like stories that, folks on our team were already interested in, whether it's around like, protest or access to abortion or, like collective action and labor disputes and stuff, which is something that I'm, personally very interested in. And it's like, so we're still trying to do those stories, but even the ones that are like counter programmed still have a tinge of a pandemic in them. Cause it's like, the story that I'm really interested in right now is like, how do we classify what is considered like essential workers, and how a lot of the things that we classify as like low skill and therefore deserving of low wages are the things that like we can't live without in a thing like what's happening right now. And so like, does that actually change the way that we think about like labor law and like minimum wage for those positions? Do we think about, pay time off for those positions, like whatever? So like, that's a larger labor story that I'm personally interested in, but obviously like it takes on at least a little bit of a pandemic flavor. And so like, we're trying to figure out how do we, not make everything about coronavirus, but also like, you can't just like not cover it because it's changing so much of everything so quickly.
Yeah. I'm curious, how do you teach people, like you mentioned teaching people how to shoot B-roll. Can you talk through that technical, like, what is it like to all of a sudden have to relinquish your visual skills to someone else and to talk them
Yeah,
through all of that?
it's interesting, when you are, filming out in the field for a long period of time, like certain things just kind of become second nature, right? Like composition, lighting, whatever, right? Filming in landscape as opposed to, portrait mode or whatever. And it's really difficult to kind of reset your mind to like you need to tell this to a person that literally knows nothing about how to like compose video, right? And then you have all other issues of like technical things of how like iPhones use variable frame rates, which is difficult to like get to match with audio. And so there's a whole like secondary post-production like problem, but that's more on our end. But as far as like coaching people through, I mean, I think that the number one thing is truly just like, you know, one, shooting landscape, because even if we do want to go vertical with it, like, we can still pull that. We typically try to get people to shoot 4K so that like we can potentially crop and move if they've composed an image, suboptimally. You can still get like the portion of the image that you might like, because most of the stuff that we publish is still 20 by 1080. So we do try to tell them to shoot 4K. And then what we found, and I haven't done a lot of this, some of my other like producers on my team have done more of this, but like one of the things that they found is that like it's useful to have them shoot like 2 or 3 things and then send them into you so that you can then give them feedback on like, hey, like this was really good, but like when you're tracking someone moving like this, like, let them leave the frame or whatever, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be that big a deal. Like, oh, like when you're talking to me, can you like face a window and not have the window behind you, even though there's like, yeah, there's nice books and stuff behind you, but like it doesn't matter because I can't see your face, right? So I think what we found is that by and large, it's better to do it, and I hate to use startup terminology, but to do it iteratively, where like they send you a few samples, you tell them, hey, like this is really good, but like do this, this, and this, and by like the second or third time they're sending video back to you, you're getting more and more of what you want, right? And like, for us, you're already like communicating with them on their cell phones, like they're expecting you to text them and to call them and whatever. So like a lot of times it's like just have them send stuff as they're doing it. They might be in scene with somebody and they can text you like, hey, like had this video come out, and like, hey, that's really good, but like make sure you get this because he's talking about that or whatever. So I would say it's more about keeping open lines of communication and doing it like step by step, video by video, as opposed to like sending them like a huge sheet of like directions and being like, this is everything that we need for a video, because it's just not like, they're not going to retain any of that information.
Gosh, that's so crazy to have to, like, what a wild experience. All of a sudden you're like intensely producing it with someone who has maybe never thought this way before.
Exactly. And it's like, it gives you a little bit of like perspective and like kind of pat yourself and like your teammates on the back. It's like the thing that we do that we consider to be relatively easy is like a lot harder than I think people realize to get the stuff that we get. So it's a little bit rewarding in that way to be like, man, like I really have learned a lot more than I thought I had from like, 5-7 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That's pretty much it. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say for someone who's about to start a virtual story, reaching out to people or like picking a person or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, I would say like, the core of storytelling is going to be what it is, right? Identifying good characters, building a good rapport with them, I think the thing that is most challenging right now is developing a visual language to tell the story where like it's clear that you're, you know, reporting it and filming it under like less than ideal circumstances without, you know, sacrificing too much, right? So figure out the treatments, figure out the frames that you're going to use to like, you know, go around the video in order to like, you know, signal that to the audience. But really what I would say is like you need to find like the right pieces of software to record the interviews that you're doing. And one, so yeah, that reminds me, like one of the things that we've had a lot of success with is like using a camera to either like film you doing the interviews, to film the screen during the interview, like give yourself some layer of cutaway, so that you're not just like cutting between like bad Skype footage over and over again. Like I have most of my interviews, I set up a camera kind of like right over the shoulder, looking almost as if like I was doing like an over the shoulder shot interviewing somebody in front of me, right? So you can see them on like the
So
big
smart.
monitor. Yeah, that I have. I have another monitor up here. So I'm looking at them this way. And so they can see me interacting with them, asking the questions. I set up another, like I just set up an iPhone using what's called Filmic Pro, which is an app that costs like $10. It allows you to lock your frame rate, lock your focal
Oh,
distance, lock your exposure.
that's
Yeah.
so nice.
Yeah, and like it can record in log as well as flat. So it's really helpful. So I bought like a $20 like iPhone tripod and set it up here for like a side shots or a wide angle. I've got one coming over the shoulder, and then I also use like Zoom to record me here. But I also use a backup recorder called OBS, which is like an open source piece of software that lets you do screen capture, which is also super useful, right? So do these things and test them before you're in prime time. Call a friend, call your mother, call, you know, a grandparent or whatever. Record yourself doing that interview so you can work out any of the kinks in the software. The other big thing I would say is that the sound quality that comes through these things is usually pretty bad. Just because weirdly the video, it's easy to compress, but audio is a lot harder, and so you end up getting glitches as opposed to like a decline in quality. So one of the number one things I have all of my interviewees do is to if they have an iPhone, which most of them do, take out their iPhone, open like the voice memos app, and just start recording the voice memo, and just set the iPhone down. Even if they're doing a FaceTime call with you, they could open another application, start the voice memos app, and come back to FaceTime, have them record the whole thing. And then when they're done, we'll have them either email to us or Dropbox it to us, depending on how large the file is. But it makes for a little bit more work in post in order to like mirror or sync the sound, I should say. But it is incredibly helpful because you're getting clean audio from their side. I actually mic myself using like a Zoom, you know, like recorder,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I've got like a mic, just a lavalier mic that I put, you know, in my shirt. So I'm recording my side, I have them record their side, and then I sync it in post. And I find that if your audio quality is really good, people will forgive a lot of the video problems, right? Like the story is going to be the story. If it's good, people are going to want to watch. If you've got shitty audio though, no one's going to put up with it, right? So have them record audio on their side. Even if it's just on an iPhone, it's still better than what you're going to get through your computer. Record audio separately on your side. That way you have backups as well as just better audio. And when you're doing your interview, I know for people that have done TV and stuff, you're going to want to put like earbuds in so that like they can hear you better and you can hear them. You should record your interviews with this computer sound on so that when your other cameras are recording it, it's catching the sound from here, because otherwise it's just silent, right? Because I'm hearing you here, no one, like nothing else is
Yeah,
catching what you're
yeah.
doing.
So it'll
And
sync it.
exactly. So you can sync it, and again, it's like a third layer of making sure you at least get some audio, because like if you do a 45-minute interview or something like that and like you didn't catch any of the audio because of a technical difficulty, they're not going to want to do that interview again. Like that's going to be a hard ask to get, like to redo the whole thing because like you messed up, right?
Yeah.
So again, like that's not going to be the best audio pulling the recorded version off of the computer like in the room.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, have backups. There's a lot of things that you can do to it in post and Adobe Audition using like, you know, repair tools and stuff, that if you just don't get it, like you're hosed, right? So yeah, so most of the advice I would give is technical, because that's like the biggest problem that we're having right now, is that like this stuff doesn't necessarily work all the time. You have lag time a lot. And so having a bunch of different ways to record it gives you a lot more options when it comes time to edit it, which is all you can really hope for in the time of Corona.
Thank you so much. That's so helpful. Yeah,
Yeah.
things that you think about, but like I wouldn't have thought of like a second camera. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're
So
so right. That's so smart to
yeah.
think that. So
Yeah, when we were told like, hey, everyone's got to leave the office, like we're clearing everybody out, all of us were like, all right, I need two A7Ss, batteries, I need a tripod, I need a secondary monitor, like, because we didn't know if we were going to be able to like go out into the field, from
yeah,
our apartments. But what we've ended up doing is finding that like a lot of the angles that we're getting, like over shoulder and like wide angle stuff, is like a lot better than like the Zoom, quality of recording or the OBS quality of recording. And it just like, it gives people a sense of like, this is the situation under which you're
totally.
reporting the story, which also like builds like, pathos from the audience to you as
Yeah,
a journalist, which will then like forgive a lot of the like sins of production that like we just can't get around right now.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. That's awesome.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I really appreciate it, and I hope life is treating you well.